Did you always think you're getting into coaching? And obviously your dad's a huge influence, and you played for Chris Miller, and I don't know all your college coaches, but talk about how they influenced you to get into coaching, or maybe they weren't the ones who did.
Yeah, so I grew up playing basketball, always loved basketball. It was right around high school time when I started to see my athletic ceiling that I realized that coaching might be something I wanted to get into. So when I was 14, I actually started as an assistant coach for Lee Adams, who's the current Holy Names coach. We coached a 6th grade girls group together. And then the very next year, when I was 15, I got my first AAU team. And I've been coaching ever since. Love it. All the coaches that I've had have played a huge influence on me. Chris Miller in high school, Al Skinner, Coach Cohen at Boston College, Dave Bike at Sacred Heart, and then biggest influence of them all, obviously my dad, who coached me all growing up through grade school and high school and AAU basketball.
So did winning state when you were a sophomore at prep, did that get into your blood so far as, I know you love kids, obviously with your A-plus program and all that, but did it get into your blood to maybe help motivate you with this group this year? Have you ever mentioned that to them?
I don't talk about that year a lot. Mostly because it was before most of these guys ever followed high school basketball. It being 13 years ago, most of these guys were little kids. But I've drawn from those experiences a lot. I've drawn from the experiences of the player and as a coach. And the biggest things, I think, are the resilience it takes to win a state title. You got to be resilient. You got to be able to bounce back. Good teams are going to face tough times throughout the game, throughout the season, and how your guys respond to that really makes or breaks whether or not you're able to be a champion.
So I came to your prep game, sat behind your bench because it was standing room only. Your loss to them. What did you? I mean, it was actually a great game to watch. The atmosphere was really exciting and all that. What did you tell your team after that game?
I thought it was early in the season. I said it's very early. I was proud of their effort. I thought we played hard the entire game. I did not think we played particularly well on aspects, especially defense. That was a game where we gave up the highest field goal percentage all year. Prep shot 54%, I believe, from the field. Haven't given up a percentage even close to that since. But I thought we could have executed a little bit better defensively, and I thought the turnovers hurt us as well. But I told them it was early in the season. I said in the Metro League, one game's not going to make or break your season, but we needed to be ready each and every night to come out and really compete. I also think it helps settle us a little bit because I think our expectations going into the year were very high, even though we never talked about wins or losses or what a goal was in terms of wins or losses. I think our guys felt, especially after watching prep, that we were a better team, which is dangerous because in the Metro League, anybody can beat you on any given night. So I thought that humbled us a little bit, which is some of what we needed, and it allowed us to be refocused. And to be honest with you, it made all of our guys much more attentive to what we were talking about. It made our guys much more focused on being locked in every single day.
So you play Beach twice, you lose kind of bad down there, I guess, and then you play them a tight game in the Metro Championship, and then you beat them in districts. What did you learn from the losses? And are you one of the coaches who, you kind of touched on it in the last comment, do you learn more in a setback than you do in a win?
Yeah, I thought we learned a lot from the first Beach game. I think we were playing really well. I believe we were on like an 8 or 9 game win streak at the time. We were playing really well. But I still thought there were some things that needed to be refined. But it's hard to teach those lessons in wins. Mm-hmm. And some of those wins were pretty nice wins. I think we beat O'Day by double digits twice during that stretch. And so it's harder to teach those lessons during those wins. I thought the first Beach loss taught us a lot about what some of our vulnerabilities were. And we were able to refocus and get a lot better at those things. I thought that second Beach loss was tough because I thought we played well enough to win. But I thought there were stretches where our defense really let down. Then to come back and beat them, I thought we were peaking at the right time, and that was probably our most complete game. There was only about a 3-minute stretch, I thought, there in the first half where we really weren't playing defense the way we wanted to. But other than that, I thought we played really well that third Beach game.
Okay, so 10-11 last year, mm-hmm. and number 1 right now going into the state tournament. So in your wildest dreams, go from there.
It's funny. I tell people all the time, we were 10-11 last year. The year before, I think we were 12-8 or 12-10 or something like that. Last year, we lost a lot of close games. The year before that, we won a bunch of close games. This year, I think we've had guys that have really improved their game. In a lot of games, we're just better than teams. I thought the close games that we've won, we've learned a lot from last year's experience, and we've executed much better down the stretch, both defensively and offensively, and have been able to win a lot of close games this year against good teams. In terms of my wildest imagination, I thought we had the pieces to be this competitive. You never know what that result's going to be, right? When you're playing good teams each and every night, there's too many variables in basketball to know how it's going to end at the end of the day. But I thought we did. I thought we had a core nucleus that could compete every night. And I think whenever you feel like you can be competitive against any team in the state, you have a shot.
Yeah. So how many years have you been at Lakeside?
It's
now?
my 4th year.
That's what I thought. So 4. And, you know, we've known each other for a long time, and a couple times you've told me it's frustrating to try to get kids in here, and people always say the private schools recruit, or they say the better the public schools recruit. And I talked to this about Ed Haskins, and I know it's frustrated you sometimes not getting kids in, but what ultimately has made you stay the course at Lakeside? What's drawn you to it?
Yeah, so when I talk about those frustrations are much more around the fact that I know it's a competitive league and I just do not have a say in admissions. I think the biggest fallacy is that I as a coach can get kids in. That's not the way Lakeside works. There's such a high academic standard. Kids really have to be able to suit the bill, and they really have to be able to do the work. But having said that, a couple different things. We're a very small school, right? So 600 kids, a little over 600 kids in the upper school, 9th through 12th. But you don't need that many kids to be competitive in basketball. You know, you need a core group of, 5 to 8 guys that can compete in the Metro League. And so from my perspective, it was a couple of things. One, the challenge of coming to a program that had traditionally not been good. I thought it was a great place to start, right? You learn a lot as a coach when you have a team that each and every night is going to be outmatched. And so that was a great experience coming into Lakeside. But then the second piece of that is, which I think is the bigger piece of why I decided to come to Lakeside, was really the vision and the mission of the school. Lakeside has done a lot of work over the last 10 or 12 years to really transform that school. And I think the ability for it to transform the school into a truly culturally competent place, that kind of foundation was breeded from a lot of people that were well before my generation, guys like TJ Vassar, people that started programs like LEAP, people that really thought a lot and thought enough about diversity and cultural competency and inclusion to really try to change the culture of Lakeside. And their efforts, I think, is why Lakeside is a school it is now. Over 50% students of color, kids from all different backgrounds, all different races, all different ethnicities. And the fact that it was a school that I thought had a mission around truly, creating an environment to prepare kids for our global economy made me want to be a part of it. I mean, that's what education is about. I'm passionate about youth development in that sense. So it made it seem like a natural fit for me to come to a school like that. So for me, it was about much more than just the basketball program. But I was glad that they did have the pieces in place, I thought, to be competitive from a basketball standpoint.
Well, that's great because you see it as a deeply philosophical thing outside of the paradigm of basketball itself. So that's what more coaches should be looking at. But I've seen you guys play probably 5 times at least this year, and the key word I hear you say, which I get it tickles me when I hear it because you wouldn't have heard it at Lakeside a number of years ago. I think you'd agree is push it, off of rebounds, obviously. And do you think that's accelerated as the season's gone along? Because you're playing bigger guys now, and now you're going a little bit smaller. And would you ever consider slowing it down, or is that kind of your non-negotiable alpha mentality now here at Lakeside?
Yeah, so I think it's all a personnel thing. I think we have the personnel this year to push the basketball. I think we're really good off of misses, pushing the ball in transition. I think it's one of our strengths. And I also think because we shoot the ball so well, that transition three, I mean, it's a great time to shoot it, and it's also a great time to offensive rebound. So we do try to push the ball a lot this year. We're not saying it's something we're completely locked into for the future, because you never would know what your personnel is going to look like. But it's so long as we have the personnel to push the ball and play up tempo, we want to play that way.
I've really been impressed with your perimeter guys, and people talk about Bothel's backcourt or maybe Lincoln's perimeter guys, but you got Tremaine and DeMarcus and Pops and Ike, and go ahead and I'll match those four guys up with anybody. Maybe a little nutshell on each one of those kids.
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So I think that's been one of our strengths this year, is the fact that we're a deep team, right? So we can go 8 deep and not really lose a lot. I think that's a luxury. So even though other teams might be better at 1 or 2 spots in their first 5, I'm not sure there's many teams that are better 1 through 8. There's probably a few, a few I can think of, but I think we're a very deep team, and I think that allows guys to play hard for spurts, come out, get a quick break, and then play hard again. Each one of those guys brings a interesting dynamic. Tremaine is a guy that can really fill it up and score, but I actually think the most dangerous part of his game is his ability to pass. I mean, he finds guys that are open. If he has a sliver of an angle, he'll throw a pinpoint pass. He sees the court really well. He's quick and is able to attack the basket so well that he creates all sort of trouble for defenses when they try to collapse on him. So he's a guy that he's an all-league guy who really gives us a lot offensively. I think probably the aspect of his game that he probably doesn't get the most recognition for, but he can be suffocating on, is defense. He's completely taken opposing players out of games before. We played Eastmont earlier this year, and they have a point guard on their team who is going to Ivy League next year, and Eastmont was a top 10 4A team all year, and made the final 16. Eastmont did, and Tremaine just completely took their point guard away. I mean, he didn't go around Tremaine not once all game. Tremaine really kept them in check, and I just think his ability to play defense is what separates him from a lot of guys as well. DeMarcus is probably, I think, the most underrated player at Metro. He was the first team all-league guy, but I'm not sure a lot of teams really understand his value. Shoots an incredibly high percentage, which for a high school kid shows basketball IQ. Shoots, upwards of 40+% from the three-point line, which is really hard to do. He's athletic, plays above the rim. And I think the aspect of his game that often is underrated is his defense. He always is guarding the opposing player's best player, and more often than not, he's held him to season lows. So he's done a phenomenal job for this year, both offensively and defensively. Poplowski, I think, is our glue guy. He's a guy that coming into the year we thought was going to play a major role with our team, but his leadership, both on and off the court, has been huge. His ability to do those little things that no one else will do, things like always getting back on defense. We know he's in the game, he's always going to get back on defense. He's one of only 2 guys on our team that has taken charges this year, and I think he's like 7 or 8 charges ahead of the next guy. He always knows the right spot to be in on offense and on defense, and he communicates like no other guy I've ever coached. He's always talking on the court. I think some of it's because his first sport is actually soccer. He's going to UPenn next year to play soccer, so he's always talking, he's always communicating. He's a positive guy, Steve Nash-esque, in that he's always picking guys up, giving them high fives. And then he's a hell of a player. I mean, shoots the ball well. I think he's probably only averaging 8 or 9 points for us, but he's had games where he's had 20. So he's capable of going for big numbers as well. Isaiah's a guy that he's a freshman and one of the better freshman guards around, and I think any freshman in Metro that can play the guard position is a pretty damn good player. So we're happy to have him. The things he's done this year in terms of creating being able to create his own shot, especially late in the season once he got comfortable, as well as his ability to create shots for other people, give us another ball handling option, and that's always a luxury when you have multiple guys that can handle the ball and play the point position. So he's another guy that is going to have a great career at Lakeside, and has done really well for us this year.
Yeah, your Metro League playoff game at Ingram against Prep, I mean, he was responsible as anybody for winning that game. He had like 4 teardroppers, and he created matchup problems that they couldn't combat that night.
And it was interesting. So I didn't realize after the game he played all 32 minutes, and I'm pretty sure that's the first time anybody's done that for us all year. But I just didn't feel like we could take him out, and I didn't realize he played 32 minutes, but I knew he was on the court a lot. But he played every minute in that game.
So how exciting is it going to be to take this team to Tacoma? Hopefully play maybe on Saturday night. I'm not going to put the pressure on you. You have to bring back the gold ball or anything, but maybe get there. And then walking into a $22 million facility next year, I mean, it's kind of like a reward. I mean, do you ever think about that, how kind of weird the chronology is? This is maybe the best team Lakeside's had for X amount of years, and then you come back to a new stadium next year?
I think about that a lot just because I'm a historical person, and I think that the opportunity that we're being given right now is something that we want to make sure to take advantage of. We got to take games one at a time. Every team's good at this point, and so we really want to make sure we're locked in and focused. But from a historical standpoint, it's pretty amazing to have the school be committed enough to raise the funds for a building before we had a year like this.
Yeah.
Right. So we were 10-11 last year, and the school still thought enough of the program, thought enough of athletics at Lakeside to do a capital campaign to raise $22 million. So that is almost more reassuring than if it were to come after we made this run, after we won a district title.
Point.
The fact that they did all those things before any of this happened. And I think that really goes further to show the commitment of the school to helping build the basketball program. And really, when I talk about commitment of the school, from my standpoint, a lot of times people focus on admissions. Admissions isn't what I mean by that, because Lakeside's never going to change their admission standards. They're very competitive school. But the 4 areas I think really need to be in place for a small school like Lakeside to be successful are: 1, your strength and conditioning. So we have a full-time strength and conditioning coach. We have a weight room that rivals small colleges, and there's a year-round program all the kids can compete in. If we're having kids from 9th grade to 12th grade, they need to be as physically fit as any kid in our league. And that's something that Lakeside has that I think is a foundational piece that's really important. The second thing is allowing Lakeside to make cuts. So basketball wasn't always a cut sport at Lakeside. A lot of people probably think, high school basketball was a cut sport, but it wasn't always the case. The reason for that is because sometimes you have younger kids that need to be developed that there's not space for if you're keeping kids that might not necessarily be, good fits in your program. So our ability to really form and create a meritocracy within the basketball program, I think, is a big deal. The third is a summer program. So Lakeside had not done a summer program since anybody can remember. Our ability to work.
And that's including camp, too. You guys got camps.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so, that's a big deal, right? So get the players in during the summer playing together. That way, when you start back in November, you're not starting from day one. You really feel like you're starting from day, 25 or 30, because the guys have already been playing together for a while. They already know some of your stuff. You can incorporate new guys into the system. So summertime, I think, is a big deal. And then the last piece, which I think is as important as any of the others, is our ability to travel out of state, right? So kids take the Christmas or winter break much more serious in terms of working on their game basketball when they know every couple of years they're going to get to travel out of state, compete against schools from around the country. And so that's a big deal for us. Even if it's down to Oregon. We've been able to fortunately travel to Hawaii. Our girls team's gone to Phoenix. But that's a big deal for us as well. So I think when those 4 things are in place from administration level, I think you're in a good spot. One other thing around the summer, I missed on, was the ability to have assistant coaches for each level. So I have assistant coach at the JV level, at the freshman level, at the varsity level. A lot of schools do not have the ability to have that. They just focus on the varsity. Yeah. And that's a big deal because you need more minds in if you're really going to help create a program.
So here's one that maybe could help out a lot of people out there. What's your best advice to other coaches concerning unrealistic parental expectations?
Yeah. 1, you got to expect it, right? So the biggest thing, I get asked all the time, and I tell people, it doesn't matter how successful you are. you're going to have parents with unrealistic expectations. So you got to expect it. Whenever you get into youth athletics, you have to know that every parent thinks their kid is better than they are, or 99%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to expect that. But the way to deal with it is to understand that you and the parent want the same thing. You both want what's best for the kid. And so that's where I think if you come from that perspective, as opposed to coming at the perspective that the parent, is completely lost and doesn't get it. If you come from the perspective that you both want the same thing
mm-hmm.
for the kid, you want what's best for them, then you always have a common ground to communicate. And then I think open dialogue. I think one thing that we do is we meet with our players every single week and have an individual meeting with them. Because if you don't say anything, something's going to be said for you. So you always have to make sure you have that open dialogue. I have an open door policy, so I allow parents to come in. Not always going to agree. So I think the last part is setting boundaries. You're not always going to agree on what should be done, right? But you allow the communication to happen, and you set the boundary so that they know some things are going to be a coach's decision. Some things, you're glad to have their input on, as well. So I think, expect it, set boundaries, and always come from the common perspective that you want the same thing for the kid.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I hope parents play that back about 3 times. Have you ever been on the fence as a player or a coach where some event triggered it in you that you just didn't think it was worth it, you wanted to quit? Or if not, there had to be a speed bump in there that kind of sticks out. You want to share an experience like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I have 2 answers for you, both as a player and as a coach. So as a player, I was fortunate to be able to play Division I basketball. My junior year in college, I was at Sacred Heart. I had a reoccurring stress fracture in my foot, the most pain I've ever had while playing, and played through it for the second half of the year. Went to see a number of doctors, but eventually got to a specialist that told me I had terrible foot structure and I needed reconstructive foot surgery. It was going to be about a 9-month recovery, and the option was to do that and have my career be over, play the next year through the pain, or do that, try to rehab through a medical red shirt and come back. Since I transferred, I was already doing 5 years in college, and that was a time when I seriously contemplated, not playing anymore. And ultimately, I decided to not have the surgery, to play my last year through the pain, and I was glad I made that decision. I had a great senior year experience. We ended up making it to the conference championship. But again, it helps you see how mortal you are and how your athletic ability is only going to go so far. But that was an experience when, without a doubt, I contemplated not playing anymore. As a coach, it was a completely different experience. So I've been at Lakeside for 4 years. And I always tell people, things are never as bad as your critics say they are when things are going poorly, and things are never as good as your fans say they are when things are going great. So I think I'm a pretty level person when it comes to that.
No peaks and valleys like John Wooden taught.
Exactly. So, but there was a time period. I'm not going to say which year, but there was a time period, one of the years I was at Lakeside, when my frustration was culminated not with players, not with parents, but with what I thought was my inability to completely communicate to my kids. And so it was really more of a I think nobody's harder on myself than I am, but it was a self-evaluation period where I said to myself, how am I not able to get through to my kids? I said, we do this every day in practice. I think everything is the way it should be going into the games, and we're just not executing. And it really it forced me to become a better coach, because I started to really dive into the ways in which people think, and how do you train them to think in practice the way that they're going to translate that to the game. So we've done a ton of stuff last year and this year just around communication. We've had sports psychologists come in. This year we did a team bonding event where we looked at different personality types, and everybody's different. And that has really helped me lock in on that a little bit better, so I communicate with different players in different ways. And even though there's some of that in basketball, the extent to which you really embrace that, I think, is the extent to which you'll be able to motivate your kids on their level, because that's really what you have to do.
Mm-hmm. So, I didn't even write this down, but you made me think of it as we were talking. How much time would you think or the importance, let's just say, of an X's and O's coach, or almost a psychologist, or you have to be both, but do you think they're equally important nowadays? Has it changed at all?
So I think it depends on your team makeup. So I think if you have players where the team chemistry and the vibe is good, you want to focus more of your time on X's and O's. But I think at a minimum, 15 to 20% of your time should always be the psychological, at a minimum. But I think in times when your team chemistry maybe isn't great, and or your coach-player chemistry isn't great, I think you should spend upwards of 60 to 70%. We spent more time than we've ever spent this year just focusing on the non-X's and O's pieces. And I think it's paid off in a lot of ways, because we do have a team that now gets along. I think, they really have embraced each other. The coach-player relationships are a lot better. But every team's not that way, right? So my first and second years were completely different, right? Those teams got along great. All those kids had been friends and they were 10 years old. There wasn't any of those issues. And so the X's and O's piece is what we spent all the time on, and I think we were able to maximize that way. So I think it's always important as a coach to get a pulse for your team, to figure out how much time you should be spending on that. And it's always tough to give up court time, right, for things that you can't necessarily see the direct benefit from right away. But I think it has to be something you truly believe in. And I think you have to have a way to go about it that you feel is valuable enough to leave court time for.
You kind of touched upon this about 5 minutes ago. So, and you were really honest about what do I need to do to get my players to listen or get my message through. So obviously, any good coach his best trait should be a good self-evaluator. But what would you say your strengths are then as a coach, and maybe something you want to work on?
Yeah, so I think my strengths as a coach, I think I know the game pretty well from an X's and O's standpoint. I also think since I'm only 10, 15 years removed from being a player, I think I also understand the individual desires that drive players and try to work with those desires as opposed to try to completely crush them, right? So oftentimes you see your coach say team first, and they completely forget about the fact that even though team is first, I've never met a good player that didn't have individual desires. And so I don't ignore those individual desires. I try to show players how they will accomplish more from an individual standpoint by working with the team. And to us, that's what team first means. Yes, we acknowledge that you're going to have those individual aspirations, but here's the best way to integrate that. And so I think those are those are the things I think I'm pretty good at. The things that I'd like to get better at, the things that I'm always constantly looking for advice on, is one, coaching defense. I think good defensive teams, no matter what level it is, are always in games. So coaching defense, different ways to get players to buy into defense, different defensive drills, always trying to get better at that. I think that's something that, for me at least, is always a focus of mine. The second piece is in-game adjustments. And when I talk about in-game adjustments, more so from a defensive standpoint than offensive standpoint. Because there's only going to be so much you can do offensively. But defensive adjustments in-game and how you make those adjustments, how you train players to be able to make those adjustments on the fly. So in-game adjustments is another piece that I definitely want to continue to get better at. And then the last piece, just because I was a guard and I think I'm pretty competent at guard development, is big man development. Right? So whenever I get the opportunity to talk to a big man coach or to go to clinics or to hear somebody who have coached really good big man, I'm always looking for little tricks, little drills, developmental things that big man can take on. So halftime of a game, going back and trying to gauge it, do you think you spend more time adjusting on defense or offense, or do you think it's pretty depending on the game, obviously, but what do you find yourself gravitating to? Here's the first thing we need to work on. Yeah, typically it's defense. Especially this year, we have a team that can score, right? So the biggest things we talk about offensively are just being unselfish and shot selection, right? So when our guys are unselfish and we have good shot selection, usually we're okay. Offensively, if we talk about anything else, it usually has to do with something that's execution. We didn't set a screen the way we're going to, bad angle, maybe a look or a read. But defensively, whole different story. If a team's hurting you in an area, like, we don't want that same thing to hurt us the second half.
Yeah. What's the Bobby Knight always said? He goes, take away the team's strength and go from there.
Exactly. So we try to make adjustments to make sure no matter what they do the second half, they don't beat us the same way they were, successful the first half.
I was writing these questions down last week, and I was actually watching the Indiana-Michigan game. Or is that Michigan State?
Yeah, it was a good game.
And Izzo was up by 4 with about a minute left, and the kids missed like 4 free throws, and he has no control over that, but he's considered a late-game coaching genius. So I was thinking about a lot of different things. I go, no matter how smart you are, the kids still got to make the lane, they got to catch the ball, they got to do all these things, and there's no magic potion. So I wrote down some things, just you don't have to address them all, but things I firmly believe in, how to close a game out. You're going to get down to Tacoma, you're not going to beat everybody by 20 points. So you got to close these games out. So secure the ball on inbounds passes. Get the ball to your best free throw shooter. Close out on three-pointers. Meet the ball versus pressure. Crisp passes. One-and-done possessions. Use your timeouts to get out of trouble. I mean, what are some things? I just threw out 6, and there's a million things, but what are some things that you really focus on at the end of a game?
So the two of those things that you just mentioned, I think, are focuses that we talk about every single situation down the stretch. One is one and done, right? No offensive rebounds. We got to make sure we're getting the first defensive rebound. So that's a big deal for us, especially down the stretch. In some of the closer games, the prep game at prep, the Franklin game at Franklin, those were 2 games where those stops down the stretch made the difference. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, I'm a coach that really believes in saving my timeouts. So use your timeouts when you're in trouble down the stretch. When in doubt, call that timeout. And so that's the other thing that we talk about a lot. All the other things are really good too, and we don't necessarily emphasize them, but we definitely talk a lot about use your timeouts. When you're in trouble, we usually always have 3 or 4. I don't, like I said, I don't use a lot. And then one first stop. Get the first stop, first rebound. Okay,
here's one. You don't know if you remember telling me this up at the Grateful Bread that you're gonna have to correct me here. You said one day you wanted to get into politics, either be the mayor or the governor. Now you can correct me on that. Is that still like a dream somewhere down the line? So
my big thing is, it could be public service in any way, shape, or form. I really enjoy the idea that what you do for 40 hours a week can make a larger influence than just collecting a paycheck. And so that's why public service and politics interests me. I was a political science major. CNN and MSNBC and Fox News at times are the stations that I tune into to keep me appraised of what's going on in the world. But no, I would love it at one point or another to be involved in public service. To what level that is, only time will tell. But yeah, that's something I would love to do. The other big reason for that is, a big passion of mine is equity of opportunity. And I think that happens in a couple different ways. I think it happens from a policy standpoint, and that's your elected officials that are actually making the laws. I think that happens from nonprofit organizations that are out there doing additional work to give opportunities to people. Right now I'm in the nonprofit world and I love it, but from a policy standpoint, I would love to one day also help make an influence, help create those opportunities, help really continue to live out what I think is the foundation for the greatest country in the nation, in the U.S. So.
Well, this leads right into my next question. My favorite quote is Jackie Robinson's epitaph. I don't know if you've ever seen it on his gravestone. It says, the only measure of a man's life is the impact he leaves behind.
Yeah.
And you're doing your A-plus program, and this kind of leads into this. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I love A-plus. We focus on youth development. So A-plus it's a youth development program that really uses sports as a vehicle for educational enrichment, mentoring services, life skill development, and we're really focused on making sure the kids are well-rounded and that they have options for life after basketball. That's our big thing. That's what we're focused on, and I just think youth are so impressionable, and the role models that they have at a young age. The mentors they have, those that are giving them their advice, really help shape who they become as people. And if we can help guide young people, help create options for them, and help make them better people, that's really what we're about. So.
The last question, the last two questions I'll make into one, and we can get out of here. Talk about your co-coaches. I always tell head coaches, since I was an assistant coach forever, I think it's a really good idea. This isn't my assistant coach. I think if you refer to them as co-coaches, it's just a better word. It's more empowering to them. And then whoever you want to thank, I know guys like Bruce Bailey or whatever else pops into your head, you can finish with.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long list of people I would like to and could thank. And it really starts from the administration at Lakeside, my athletic director Abe. In terms of the coaching staff, there's nothing that a head coach can do on his own that he's not better at with assistant coaches that are strong. And I think we have a strong group of coaches, a few of whom I think could be head coaches themselves. And I'm the type of coach that really feels when you approach games, when you approach practice, when you approach preparation, when you approach how you're developing your team, you really need everyone's imprint on that. That's the way in which I think you get the best product. It can't be, a genius with a thousand minions. It really has to be a group process, and that's what we try to do. We try to make sure everyone has input, everyone has feedback, and that's how we go about running the program. And just in terms of support, I mean, that's part of the reason why I think Lakeside's such a special place. Guys like Bruce Bailey, was a former coach. He was there when they were good in the 70s and 80s. Had a great run of teams. Super supportive. Was at one time an assistant coach with me. Abe Miller, who's my athletic director, I think is incredibly great to work for. Super well organized.
And he helped coach too, right?
Yep. And I was assistant under him for a year before I got the head job, and he did a lot to get the program to a point where it could be competitive. And now as an athletic director, he's helping build the entire athletic program into a pretty special place. So all the way, like I said, all the way up to our head of school Bernie and assistant head of school Dan. I think the support's there, and a lot of great people, all with basically the same goal. That's to make sure that our young people have a rich experience in whatever they participate in. I happen to be with the team on the basketball court, but the same level of expectation, the same level of excellence exists, no matter what the sport, no matter what the class is at Lakeside.
That's great. That's interview number 2 with Tavio Hobson. They'll be playing University at what time?
9 p.m. on Thursday. And thanks for having me, Greg.
Oh, my pleasure. This is great. This is our second one, and I'm excited about the series.
Okay.